Fisherman from the next town over. I've been lurking this group for a while now, and have been thinking of sharing my experience. I'm not sure if it's let's not meet material, but this rattled me quite a bit at the time. In spring a few years ago, I moved out of state for graduate school. Being new to the area and slow to meet people in general, I spent my free time exploring the surroundings by myself, or I would drive a few hours north to be with my fiance. One long weekend, I decided to take a little road trip to the south coast of Oregon and do a solo overnight backpacking trip on a trail that had been on my wish list. To elaborate about me, I'm a short female of slight build, nothing threatening about me, and I'm well aware that I am vulnerable when I go alone. However, I have a lot of backcountry experiences, and I've gone on many hikes before without incident. Up to this point, I only had positive experiences with people in the backcountry. Anyways, I leave super early in the morning to get to the trailhead by mid-morning. I get my things together for the hike. The trail is in national forest and follows the length of a beautiful river. It's popular with rafters and hikers alike. This helps me to feel at ease. But something feels off this time. I feel physically uneasy, but I brush it off as anxiety of being in a new and unfamiliar place and set off on my hike. I plan to camp at a spot next to the river about 8 miles in. I hike the first few miles of the trail in peace, passing the occasional group of hikers coming the opposite direction. It was a gorgeous day. The sunlight dappled the trail, and once in a while, I would get a peek of the brilliant blue of the river through the trees. Birds were chirping. I was starting to feel more comfortable as I walked on. My only concern was avoiding the poison oak that stretched into the trail and brushed my legs. At one stretch in the trail, I noticed a man stopped about 10 meters ahead of me. He was looking directly my way as I approached, and I could clearly see he was looking at me, coming towards him. He made me feel uneasy. It was a bit odd to stare someone down like that with such intense interest. When I got closer, he moved to the side of the trail and abruptly turned his back and bent over as if to tie his shoe. I took this as a sign he didn't want to talk and was relieved. I just wanted to get by him. I greeted him as I passed. He made a show of acting surprised at my presence and said, "Oh, you snuck up on me there. I didn't see ya." This was odd, because he definitely saw me, but I said something like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to give you a scare." He took this as a means to start polite conversation. "Where are you hiking to today?" he asked. "Oh, the camp 8 miles in," I say. "There's a big group there tonight. I'm coming back from that way. You might want to stay a spot just before it." He is an average build and elderly, maybe 60 or so. He's wearing a gray tank top with sweat stains under the armpits and is shining with sweat. His hair is gray, about shoulder length and curly, rosy cheeks. As I stand there, he is looking me up and down as if I were a piece of meat. Dirty old man, I think. I thanked him for the helpful tip, about to wish him well on his hike out. He continued with more questions. "Where are you from? Who are you hiking with today?" I started a series of unwise, truthful answers to his questions by telling him I'm new to the area and am originally from across the country, though I've been living in various places across the west coast for some time now. When he asks where my family and fiance are, I tell him back east and up north. When he asks if I know anyone around my new town, I say no. He asks what car I drive and I tell him, as I'm telling him that I am alone and my loved ones are far away and unaware of my specific whereabouts. It occurs to me that I should be lying about all this stuff. Inwardly, I'm starting to panic and cursing my stupidity. This guy is off. These questions aren't what people with good intentions ask. I start to ask him questions just to stop talking about me, because I don't know what else to do. He's a retired fisherman from the next town over. He hikes trails all over the south coast. Finally, after about 15 minutes of conversation, I say I better get going. He reminds me that I should set up camp at the alternative spot he recommended, and tells me what a pleasure it was that I snuck up on him. He then said something that sets off all the alarm bells. "See you soon." After we part, I can barely continue down the trail because my legs feel weak. I'm holding back tears. I pass one other group, but I don't feel safe, and my mind starts racing through my options. I know at the very least, I don't want to camp in any designated campsites. I have a strong feeling that this guy is not actually on his way back to the trailhead, and decide to get off trail, where I have a suitable vantage point of the trail. I'll hunker down there and watch for him. If I don't see him, I decide I'll just spend an uncomfortable night in a hidden roost off trail. I turn left off the trail around a bend that hid me from the view from anyone walking that same direction. I thrashed through the poison oak and brushed to a spot amongst some oak trees that offered a somewhat protected spot to watch the trail. I shed my gear and flatten myself out, eyes on trail. As I wait, I worry about all sorts of things. Am I even hidden? Am I being ridiculous? Sure enough, however, I see him after about 10 minutes of my stakeouts. He is swiftly hiking back up the trail in the direction I was going. He's looking straight ahead and does not see me peeking out of the trees. I have another flurry of panic and uncertainty about what I should do, but ultimately decide to wait for somebody to come down the trail in the direction of the trailhead, who I would then follow out in relatively close proximity. I have to wait another 15 minutes for another group to pass by before I make my way down the hillside for the hike out. When I get to my car, I don't even bother changing out of my sweaty hiking clothes and boots. I drive straight home, thankful that all I got from the trip were some poison oak rashes. So, retired fisherman from the next town over, let's not meet again. The late night crew. To start, I go to school in Boston. For privacy reasons, I'm not going to include the name of the school, but if anyone reading this also goes here, I think you'll be able to figure it out. So, at the end of the spring semester last year, one of the dorm buildings on campus was closed for renovations. Since then, construction crews have been constantly working on completely stripping the building and redoing it entirely. Lately, it's become more of a issue because the dorm I'm living in right now is next to it, so residences are often woken up very early in the morning to the work being done. In response, the school set up a meeting for students to voice their concerns to the project manager and members of the administration here. Obviously, nothing can be done to stop the construction. They just want to make it look like they care and are trying to do something about it. I'll get back to this later. Anyways, on a few occasions, I've seen workers doing work outside my window. There's probably like a 20-foot gap between my room and a part of the building having all the construction being done, so I have a really clear view of anyone out there. If my window is open, I can also hear them talking. I never really thought too much about it. I expected to see people there. The weird thing is that sometimes workers show up really late, like between the hours of 12:30 a.m. and 2 a.m. late. I usually notice because I'll see flashlights moving outside my window and hear the door that leads onto the roof opening and shutting. At first, I was a little weirded out by it. Why would they need to be up that late? As I continued though, I just started ignoring it because I figured it was just some late night crew or security that went up to make sure nothing was out of place. As I very recently found out though, that is not the case. About a week ago, I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep. Suddenly a brief flash lit up the room. I looked around for a minute and then it happened again. I looked out the window and realized it was just the workers walking around the roof with flashlights. I ignored them and tried to fall asleep. Before I could even close my eyes though, I heard a conversation ensue. "He's sleeping," a deep voice said. "Yeah, looks like it," responded another voice. "Tonight?" asked the first voice. No. Let's wait a little longer," said the second voice. "Whatever you say." Soon after I heard the door shut and peeked out the window to see that both of them had left. I stayed frozen in my bed for a while, wondering if they had been talking about me. I eventually told myself that they were talking about a friend of theirs or something, and I had nothing to worry about. I closed my eyes and fell asleep. When I woke up, I was still a little worried, so I asked my roommate if they ever seen or heard those guys out there. Both of them thought I was joking, but I assured them I was very serious. Both said they had no idea what I was talking about. They didn't come back for another week, but before I saw them again, I decided to attend the sit-down the school had set up. When it was my turn to speak, I asked about the late night crew. I wanted to know why they were up there so late, and it was entirely necessary, as it was preventing me from getting a full night's rest. The project manager just stared at me for a minute. "Late night crew?" he asked. "Yeah, the guys who come there sometimes really late and just kind of walk around with flashlights," I responded. He stared at me for another minute or so. "We don't have a late night crew," he said in a quiet voice. No one said anything. Everybody was just staring at me. Finally, someone from the administration said that it may be homeless people who had found their way up the roof and were using it as shelter, and that they would keep a better eye on the entrance to the building at nighttime. There's a lot of impoverished individuals in the area, so it sort of made sense. The only part that I was confused about was that the people aren't staying up there all night, but just for like 5 to 10 minutes. I decided not to mention that part. That was 2 days ago. I didn't see anyone that night, but last night is a different story, same as usual. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I heard the door open again. This time, there were no flashlights. Very slowly, I strained my neck to get a look out the window, while still remaining hidden. I saw two figures standing on the roof facing my window. Nothing happened for about 30 seconds, and then one of them said something. I recognized the two voices as the ones from before. Their conversation went a little like this. Did you get the email from Bill? Bill is the project manager. Yeah. Looks like this isn't gonna work out, huh? Guess not. You think he's listening right now? It's possible. Are you? Can you hear us, buddy? Are you listening? At this point, my heart was practically beating through my chest. I didn't know how to react. I just stayed in the same position, completely frozen, hoping they would just leave. Cut it out. We really shouldn't be up here much longer. What? I'm just messing around, but yeah. Looks like this is a goodbye, bud. Don't worry, though. We'll be seeing you around. After a brief moment of neither of them speaking, they both turned to the door and walked away. I didn't sleep much last night because of that. I don't really know how to handle something like this, and if I should bring it up to the school again. Based on what they said, though, it seems like they won't be around anymore still, though. These guys know where I live. I can only hope. They haven't seen my face, but I think I'll be avoiding the construction area for a while now. Listed under not good ideas, taking the dark, creepy shortcut. When I used to tell this story to my shitty friends, they acted as though it wasn't a big deal, and I was just exaggerating to get attention, so I stopped talking about it. But now, as an adult who has lurked this up for quite some time now, I've realized I'm not alone. It's okay to talk about it if it makes me feel better or gives me closure, regardless of anyone who tells me to stop whining, so here goes. In the spring of 2006, I was 18 years old and apparently wildly naive. I lived in a fairly populated city where a few major crimes happen. Most of the time, when someone was murdered or missing, it was always turned out to be in relation to people they knew or a drug deal gone bad. Very typical crime, nothing that could be classified as scary or induce parents to keep their children indoors. My boyfriend at the time worked at the gas station and convenience store about a 20-minute walk away from where I lived at my parents' house. His shifts were from 3 in the afternoon until midnight, and he worked alone. Everyone who's ever worked in a place like that knows that some nights of the week are just slow, no matter how many people live in the area. On nights like that, where he knew that boss man wouldn't be back that evening, he would shoot me a text asking if I was interested in coming down to hang out or study or do whatever it was that I forgot I was doing at that stage. Since I was completely convinced nothing was going to happen to me, I would walk down by myself and then head home around 11 when he had to actually start working to close the store. One fateful night, I was walking up from hanging out when a car pulled up to me and someone rolled down their window. Naturally, I stopped walking and leaned down to look in their car and asked them what they needed. Before you call me dumb, you should understand that in the area I lived, this isn't unusual behavior, because 9 times out of 10, it's someone asking directions, and the 1 time out of 10, it's because they thought you were someone that they knew. So imagine my shock when I look in the car and the first thing I see is a fucking gun sitting on this guy's passenger seat, sort of half hidden under a coat or sweater. I had never seen a handgun before. I start to sweat. The second thing I took in was that this guy had to be at least 40 years old and had a very creepy air about him. In my surprise, I hadn't noticed that he was asking me a question, so I sort of stumbled around my words and said something along the lines of, what? He responded with, "A fine thing like you shouldn't be walking around by yourself, baby. You get in the car and I'll give you a ride." This was said more like a statement than a request. I was still a good 10 minutes from my house, and there was no way I was getting in the car with this guy. I didn't want to piss him off, so in my panicked state, I put on a sort of choked, cheerful voice and told him that it was cool because I only live right there, and pointed to a house about 10 meters away. He said something like that sucked, but I should give him my number so he can call me later. Again, not wanting to piss him off, I quickly gave him my boyfriend's number, thinking I was a genius, because he'd drive home, call that number, and get told off by my boyfriend, and by the time he figured out anything, I'd be long gone home. He pulls away and I think I'm in the clear, until I see that he drives off in the direction that I need to walk home and fuck. Not wanting to risk him seeing me, but wanting to get home ASAP, I make the quick choice to take the creepy dark shortcut behind the high school. Big mistake. He must have seen me dart up the hill before he had driven too far, because by the time I got up there and around the back of the school, I can see his car pulling up too fast for me to get out of sight. Like an idiot, I freeze when his car gets real close to me. He gets out and starts yelling like a crazy person, calling me a lying cunt and asking me why all pretty girls lie to nice guys like him, how he just wanted to give me a ride and I had to be a bitch about it, and bitch little girls need to be taught some manners. The whole time he was saying this, he was taking off his belt. There was a whole other slew of things he was yelling, but I was trying to block him out and weigh my options. Option 1, turn around and run into the pitch black field that I knew pretty well, down a giant ditch, up the other side that goes right into a very nice neighborhood, full of people letting out their little dogs to pee at night, screaming my head off and hoping someone hears me. Option 2, run right by him down the street full of cars and people by risking him grabbing me on the way, or if he had his gun on his person, being a crazy fucker and shooting at me. Number 3, pee myself out of fear right there and hope he thinks I'm gross and crazy and goes away. Option 3 was a really heavy contender for a moment. I can't actually say with a full certainty that I chose one. I think it just happened on instinct or adrenaline or something, but while he was in the middle of telling me how I needed to be taught a lesson with his dick, I turned around and ran faster than I ever thought I could into the pitch black. I didn't even realize he was chasing after me until I jumped down into the ditch. As I was climbing up the other side, I heard him come falling straight down past me. He must have not seen that there was a drop-off coming, because from the sounds he was making, he was feeling the pain of an unexpected 7-foot drop. Because my luck had been so awesome up until this point, I was only a little surprised when I couldn't climb anymore, because my sweater was caught up on a bush or branch that I couldn't make out very well in the darkness. While I was frantically trying to get unstuck, I felt his hand close in around my ankle and tried to pull me down. There was no room in front of me to try and pull my leg up out of his grasp, so after a struggle, I got the only actual good idea I had all night. I pulled myself up as hard as I could and suddenly let go so that when he pulled me down, not only did I get released from being caught in the bush, I toppled him over the landing real hard on top of him. He hadn't let me go in the process, so I sprung back up and climbed up and out of the ditch and ran to the nearest house. To my great surprise, the woman who answered the door screamed when she opened it. I hadn't noticed on the short run from the ditch to the house, but my shirt was covered in blood. I didn't understand at first. From what I could tell, I only had some scrapes and bruises. I eventually learned that when I landed on top of this guy, I broke his nose in such a way that it fucking exploded blood everywhere. The police were called and he was arrested at the ER later that night while being treated for a broken nose and a fractured wrist. He was eventually, I mean, after 2 years of who knows what, only sentenced to 3 years for assault and carrying a concealed weapon without a license, but was given 2 years of the time served because he had no priors. He was a fucking teacher. He had a son my age. My parents wanted to push for attempted rape, but my cousin, who was a paralegal, gave us a whole bunch of reasons about why it probably wouldn't go through, and that since it would be a charge we would have to lay separate from the other charges, the legal fees didn't seem worth it. At the time, I really didn't understand how the system worked, and I just wanted the whole thing to be over. The worst thing was that I was only 18, and if it happened a month before, he would have been given so much more time for assaulting a minor. It's been 10 years, and I still get nervous when a car drives by me a little too slowly, or when someone grabs me from behind. Although now I'm way quicker just to tell someone no. I always carry a can of pepper spray, and have taken a few classes on basic self-defense. And when a friend offers to walk me home at night, I always say yes. So, guy that tried to maybe murder and probably rape me, let's not meet. I like my clothes way too much to get them covered in your blood again. Was almost trafficked. When I was a freshman in high school, 2011, I was 15 years old. I had this little group of friends from middle school that I hung out with. We were all girls, and there were 4 of us. So every Friday, the mom of one of my friends would pick us up, and we would go get frozen yogurt to then go to the mall, where my friend's mom would let us loose and tell us to meet her back at the central part of the mall around 6 p.m. So this one Friday, we were all walking around and shopping, and we decided to get food at the food court. Normally we wouldn't split up, but the other 3 girls wanted Carl's Jr. I wanted Panda Express, so I told them I would meet them at our table, and I went to the other side of the food court to get my food. After I got my food, I was grabbing chopsticks and napkins and stuff when this older man, maybe in his 40s, walks up to me. He was fairly well groomed, but was wearing a suit. He asked me how old I was, so I told him I was 15. He said that was perfect, because he was from a modeling agency, and they were looking for girls my age to be models for a junior's clothing line. My naive self was really excited, so he gave me this card about the size of a postcard that had all the agency information on it and stuff like that. I think I ended up leaving it on the table after I ate, and I had pretty much forgotten by the time I got home. The same sort of thing happened a few other times I went to the mall with friends. Fast forward about 5 years to April 2016, in one of my college classes, we had a speaker come in who was from an organization dedicated to stopping sex trafficking. Anyways, this woman was talking about different ways that traffickers will lure young girls and boys into going with them and getting into the trade. Something she said struck me, so I stayed after class. and I told her the story I just told you. She said they knew about this tactic, and I got reports of it happening at the mall I used to go to every week, at that exact same mall. She said it was very likely that the man who approached me was looking to get me into the trade, so creepy fake agent dude. Let's not meet again. Former park ranger. A few years ago, my friend Tez and I set out on the Great American Road Trip. We were going to drive from New York to Los Angeles, zigzagging through the country for 6 weeks. We were both in our early 20s, pretty broke, and as my mom had been a long-haul trucker, I suggested that we save a ton of money and we should sleep in the back of our hatchback. It was a pretty cozy setup. We bought some blankets and sheets at Goodwill and cut one of them up to make curtains. By the end of the first week, we'd gone so we could set up the camp in about 10 minutes. Luggage moved to the front, curtains up, bedding laid down, and out for the night. We slept in parking lots, free campsites, rest areas, basically anywhere it seemed safe and semi-legal. There was never a night where we felt scared until the last week of the trip in Arizona. We were near Flagstaff, and I'd gotten pretty used to our routine. We didn't go on a set schedule and would never drive more than 3 or 4 hours a day. No destination really in mind. We drive to places we found the night before on Google and take suggestions from other campers, locals, and people we met. We'd also gotten very good at making friends. We went to Denny's with a group of rednecks we met at a campsite, in the back of their pickup, played the guitar with some musicians in the middle of a thunderstorm, got fed breakfast and dinner by tons of campers who invited us to hang out with them, spent the 4th of July with a family who basically adopted us into the campsite. Basically every encounter we had with a stranger was a positive one. This night didn't look to be any different. We found our free campsite on Google and drove up into the woods, following our GPS. We were pretty far out of town and something seemed a little off when we pulled up to the campsite. There was one RV parked and 2 cars further up in the trees. We pulled up near the RV and a man opened the door. Tez waved hello and he just stared at her. His expression was completely blank. Then, as if she hadn't said anything, he just slowly closed the door again, staring at us the entire time. Figuring he just wanted some privacy and thought we'd be obnoxious, we pulled further down the road and found a flat spot to park the car, instead of our usual routine of setting up camp immediately, while it was still light outside. We goofed around for a bit, smoking and laughing and taking dumb photos of ourselves. Tez pointed out a campfire further down the campsite, and we decided to go be friendly. We met so many cool people in the previous 5 weeks by just going up and offering beer or just chatting, so we wandered over. Near the campsite there were 2 men, the owners of the cars we'd seen earlier. They seemed friendly and we sat down to chat with them. They were drinking and smoking, and we sat down and had a beer with them. One of the men seemed pretty off, and we came to find out that the 2 of them didn't actually know one another. The older man was definitely on some sort of drugs. He was spinning in circles and was talking about UFOs, however he seemed harmless. This left us chatting with the younger man, who claimed to be a former park ranger. He was handsome and easygoing, and we spent several hours just chatting about our trip, families, everything. Then he started talking about the bear. He'd seen a bear earlier in the forest. Tez didn't believe him, and he pulled out his camera to show her photos of the bear. It was very close to the campsite, and we both were a little freaked out. It wasn't unheard of for one of us to get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, so the idea of bear hanging around in the night spooked us. The ranger just laughed, and then expression changed completely. It's hard to describe, but his voice seemed somehow cold. He said, "If you get out of your car in the middle of the night, it's not a bear you should be worried about." I kept waiting for the laugh, for him to nudge Tez with his elbow. Jokes on the foreigner and the city girl, right? He never did. I laughed awkwardly and made a dumb joke about serial killers in the woods. My friend laughed as well and joked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We moved on to another subject, but within 5 minutes the ranger had come back to it and was talking about something grabbing us from our car in the middle of the night. No matter how we tried to steer the conversation away from serial killers, he kept latching back on. The older man was high as a kite at this point and was just staring at the stars, not talking. We just awkwardly laugh and sip our beer and try to get the conversation going somewhere else. Then the ranger stood up and walked towards a cooler to get another beer. At this point it's pitch black out, and I can't see anything outside the circle of light from the campfire. The beer cooler was outside of that circle. Suddenly there was a red dot in the darkness, and it took a moment for me to realize that it's a camera. The ranger is holding a camera. He had taken a photo of us. I could see the screen on the digital camera lit up. Now, it wasn't on for the people we met to ask to take pictures with us. My friend Tez is gorgeous, dark hair, blue eyes, like a young Megan Fox, and we were friendly. People like having pictures of themselves. It was an entirely strange thing to have this person take a picture of us without asking, or even indicating that that was what he was doing. We were both staring at him like deer in headlights at this point, but instead of realizing what he's doing is a bit weird, he checked his camera, adjusts some things, and takes another photo, this time with a flash. No asking us to smile, no proposing a group photo, and no explanation. After this photo, he comes back to the fire and sits down. Not a word said about the photo. At this point, me and Tez are mutually freaked out. We make some BS excuse that we need to go set up our campsite and nope the hell out. When we stand to leave, the UFO guy smiles and says to have a good night. Ranger, however, looks at us with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes and says, "Be careful out there. There's more than bears in the woods." Every hair in my body stood on end. I wasn't alone in my discomfort either, because Ted laughed a response out and pulled me away from the campfire towards our car. We rushed back to the car, which we only found in the dark by referencing the RV and jumping in the front seats. My friend Tez is all but hyperventilating. "Why do you take a picture of us?" I was shaking. I responded, "I read that serial killers sometimes warn their victims." She stared at me for a second and then locked the car doors. "Do you think he just took victim photos of us?" We both freaked out. She is in full panic and turns the headlights on in the car. I immediately yell at her to turn them off, because now he knows exactly where our car is. God knows why, but that is the only night we'd not set up camp. We didn't need to tear anything down, so we just put the car in drive and floored it out of the campsite. As we got onto the dirt road, Ranger was walking towards our car with that same cold expression. "Ranger, let's not meet ever again." ARYAN race guy in the park. I'm 24 years old now, and this happened when I was approximately 12 years old. I was at home with my sister and her friend, who were both around 9. My mom had gone out somewhere, I can't remember where, but she said she'd be gone for 2 hours. I had asked if we could go into the park that was nearby our home at the time, so we could feed the ducks. To get a better idea, the park I'm talking about was less of a park and more of a series of trails secluded by areas of dense trees. Along the main trails were smaller trails that led to openings that met with a small pond and lake. If I were to walk out in the middle of the pond and lake, the water would really only go up to my waist. Most of the houses in their neighborhood backed into some part of the trail, so my mom said we could go as long as we did not stay long, and left a note on the table with what time we left the house. Me being 12 years old at the time, I was quite excited about being able to take care of the 2 younger kids, who were also excited to go without parents. So we took our duck feed and headed off to the park. It's important to note that I am quite fair-skinned, blue-eyed, and with light blonde hair. My sister and her friend are both skin shade or 2 darker with brown hair and brown eyes. We are all females. We headed for an opening with a bench of about 3 minutes from the start of the trail that had a great spot to feed the ducks, which was our usual spot. As we approached the clearing, I saw a bike leaning on a tree, and I remember feeling odd about that because 99% of the time we walked to that spot, there was never anyone there. As we entered the clearing, I saw an overweight older man with buzz-cut hair and a very distinct bright yellow rain jacket. I felt uncomfortable about this. However, a part of me wanted to be adult-like and brave, so I did not choose to move to a different spot. I pretended that I did not actually feel uncomfortable, so I did not scare my sister and her friend, both sensitive and easy to scare kids to be honest, and gave them some duck feed to bring the ducks closer to us. As they approached the water line, I hung back to keep an eye on this older man who had not said anything to us at this point. After a few minutes, he started talking to me. I can't exactly remember what he said, but it was things like, "Nice day to be out for a walk," or "Lots of ducks around here." He was quite enthusiastic and kept attempting to start a conversation. I was giving small one-word answers to let him know I was not interested in talking. I felt it was way too weird for an older man to be talking to girls as young as us. It was also weird because he refused to look or talk to the other 2 with me. After repeated attempts on his part to start a conversation, and my many attempts at stopping it, I decided I was too creeped out. I walked towards my sister and her friend and told them that we were leaving. As I did this, the man said, "Wait, you look like a nice girl." At this point, I had stopped and turned around, red flags everywhere. I looked at him and all I said was, "Okay." My sister and her friend at this point were stopped and intently listening. To give you a visual, I was now standing between my sister and her friend, who were standing at the waterline of the lake, and the bench where the man was sitting. The man continued talking, but unfortunately, I don't remember a lot of what he said, because I was so freaked out. I was also formulating a plan that if shit hit the fan, I would tell them to swim across the lake and run home. I do remember pretending to pay attention and nodding my head a lot. Then the man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He gave it to me and asked me to read the paper and really think hard about the message. I said, thanks. I'll do that when I get home. I dropped the paper on the top of our duck feed bucket and pushed my sister and her friend in front of me and started walking away. As soon as we had left the clearing, I told them we needed to run home. Both of them were now freaking out because they knew the whole interaction was strange, and I knew I was not uncomfortable. I told them to run to our home while I lugged the duck feed bucket with the weird paper with me. By the time we had gotten home, my mom was back, and my sister and her friend were now crying. My mom asked what the hell happened, so I told her what had happened and handed her the paper that I'd been given. I watched her face as she started to read it, which became more visibly distressed. She finally put down the paper and told me to go play with my sister. A little while later, I still wondered about the note, so I went and asked my mom what the hell the note said. She asked me if I remembered what I learned in school about Hitler in World War II. I said, yes, I do. She told me that in the note was a long explanation as to why the Aryan race was superior, that only fair-skinned, blonde-haired, and blue-eyed people were peer, and went on to say that we need to rise up above and join together to preserve our rightful place. Needless to say, my family does not believe that garbage, and it deeply disturbed my mother. She phoned our police station and made a report, and they told her that there have been multiple reports about this man doing this to other people that match the Aryan race, and they were actively searching for him. So, creepy guy in the park, let's not meet again.